Hi my darlings, I'm Sophie Darling and welcome back to the channel. Today we are reacting to episode 10 of Apothecary Diaries. This show, I want to inject it into my veins. It is so good. I think this has edged Freerin out of second place for me. I love Freerin so much, do not get me wrong, but there is just something about Apothecary Diaries that has me hooked, and I just want to watch more and more and more and more. And I get to the end of what I can recall with Apothecary Diaries because unfortunately I have other things to be recording at the same time, and I'm always disappointed when I have to move on because I'm like, I want to watch the next episode. I want to see what happens. I want to see this dynamic. I want to know more about the court politics. Who's poisons Lishi? Will we find out if Jinshi is a eunuch? Will we find out if he's the Emperor's brother? Will we learn more about Aldua? Because she's kind of this mysterious courtesan, because we have seen a little bit of Lishi, a little bit of Lihawa, a little bit of Gyokyu, but we haven't really seen anything about Aldua. And then last episode, it was revealed that Aldua's head lady in waiting was actually the one that had burns on her arms, which means she is associated with whatever underlying threat is happening right now in the rear palace. I think she's behind this servant dying because the servant was the one that poisoned Lishi's bowl. So I think that the servant was killed because she's the one that slipped the poison in, and it was to silence her. That's where I think this is going, where it's sort of delving into. But yeah, Aldua is kind of this mysterious courtesan. We've seen a glimpse of her. We've seen her ladies in waiting clashing with Lishi's ladies in waiting, but we haven't actually really seen Aldua's interaction with the other courtesans or even Mao Mao's interaction with her. Not that there's been a necessity for Mao Mao to interact with her, but still we haven't really seen anything of her other than she's known as the virtuous. So it's going to be interesting to learn a bit more about her. We also don't know why Mao Mao's dad said it was interesting that she, after all this time, would end up in the rear palace. We also don't know if Mao Mao has a mum. Her mum's never been mentioned. There's also been these like weird flashbacks to this woman looking out the window, and we've seen it a few times in previous episodes. It doesn't really delve much into it, but it's almost like Mao Mao is seeing like a flashback and something's triggering this memory of this woman, and she's like looking out the window and she's lying down and her legs are kind of like curled around her, but she's like looking out the window almost like she's in a daydream, but we never see her face and we don't know who she is or what the connection to her is. But Mao Mao occasionally has those thoughts of her, almost as if she's remembering something. So I'm like, is that her mom? And the reason that the memory is so unclear is because it's maybe a memory that Mao Mao has from being a little child, and that's why we don't really see much more than that continued play of the frame, because it's emphasizing that childlike nature, that we don't always remember our memories clearly, but sometimes something significant stands out to us. It's just Mama keeps getting that image, and we've never heard anything about her mom. So now I'm like, is that her mom? And this memory is like Mama's last memory of her because she was a child, and maybe the reason they don't talk about her is because she's died and passed away and it's like traumatic to her dad, and maybe she doesn't really have clear memories of her mom, and that's probably why she doesn't really talk about her, especially if she was young and her mom died. But yeah, it's just a bit of like a little underlying mystery that we don't know yet what that's referring to or why it crops up so much, especially in relation to poisonings. It's always when there's a conversation about poison and the effects of poison that Mamo kind of has like this image. I think it's been like maybe one or two episodes where like that image has come in and it's been so like brief. But I think it was also in the stream of conscious images last episode where we had like all the women like connected and everything they've gone through. And I think it was in those images, which is why it's come into my head as something like we've never quite questioned that, or what is that in reference to? But from what I can remember, it's always when Mama's talking about poison. So could it be that her mom was poisoned? Could it be that's why they left the palace? Because I still think Momo's family is more affluent based on the fact that she can read and write. That's such a big telltale sign that they weren't always commoners, that they weren't always living this almost rustic lifestyle. And the fact that her dad had made a comment about her ending up back at the palace, like after all this time, that kind of, I can't remember the exact line, but it was just something that, like, what a strange twist of fate after all this time that Mao Mao would end up in the palace. So that kind of infers that there's a connection there to the palace, that they are associated with it. And I still think it could be that potentially, what if her parents met, they married, her mum was poisoned because of the court dynamics and maybe jealousy, and died, and Mao Mao's dad decided to take Mao Mao away to protect Mao Mao because he didn't want her to ever have to go through what her mother suffered, because of how rumor and gossip can literally be the downfall of an individual, and he doesn't want Mao Mao to be associated with that. So it's his way of protecting her is by removing her from the very palace that led to her mother being killed. And he saw his wife being poisoned because of maybe jealousy, maybe somebody just didn't like her, maybe she spurned someone's advances, and they decided to take her out of the picture through poison and made it look like an accident. And he's like, if this can happen to my wife, this could happen to my daughter. I don't want her involved with this. I will take her to the country. We will live a rustic lifestyle, but she will be safe from the palace and the political dynamics and the toxicity associated with that. It just seems like there's more to Mao Mao than meets the eye, especially the whole drawing on the freckles, which we know is in reference to deterring assault and deterring men from being attracted to her because of the area that she lives in, which is the pleasure district, means that men see women as objects to please them rather than as actual people, rather as human beings with thoughts and feelings and emotions. They just see them as something to relieve themselves with, as an object of pleasure rather than as a person. So we know that that's why she draws the freckles on, because it's not the beauty standard. So freckles, light tan skin in this period of time, were not the ideal beauty standard because it was seen as being commoner traits. And the reason it was associated with commoner traits is that you were working outside under the sun for long periods of time, which would result in your skin becoming tanned and also freckles to form. So it was associated with being low born or common, that you work for a living, whereas pale skin and smooth skin was seen as the ideal beauty standard for women because it showed that you were well taken care of, you were pampered, you didn't have to toil outside, you had the luxury of reclining indoors and having everything done for you. So it's why you see a lot of women, like servants, using face powder to whiten their skin because they don't have the luxury that the noble women do of being pampered and being able to lighten their skin from not spending time outdoors. So it's why we have the nurse that was feeding Gyokyu's baby in episode 1 was using the makeup to lighten her skin because she doesn't have the luxury that Gyokyu has. And Gyokyu doesn't use the makeup. It's not Gyokyu that is causing the illness of her baby. It was the nurse. And Lee Howard uses it. We're not sure why. I think it could be insecurity. It could be based on the fact that Gyokyu is a European princess. From what I can gather, she is from the West. So I think she's meant to be a European princess, European figure that has married into the East. So Gyokyu would have fair skin. So it could be that Lihawa uses the whitening face powder to lighten her features because she feels that in order to compete with Gyokyu for the Emperor's affection, her skin needs to be as white as possible. It needs to be as fair and unblemished as possible, which is where my mind is maybe going with it. I think it could be linked to Gyokyu being from the West and Lee Howard. We're not quite sure, but I think is from the East. And maybe the pressure of obtaining westernized beauty standards in the East has led to the popularity of skin whitening products. You know, it is a real issue in Asia that women are ashamed of having darker skin, which is absolutely bizarre because in the West, women will do everything they can to be as dark as possible. And then in the East, women will do whatever they can to whiten their skin. And yes, I know it's linked to European imperialism and it's linked to colonialism. It's also linked to this idea of being pure and unblemished in its association with being light and not being a commoner by being outside and under the sun. But there are obviously deeper connections to it in terms of imperialism and colonialism. But it always strikes me as women will always want what they don't have. And beauty standards play on those insecurities. So in the West, it's seen as odd if you don't tan. So I've never tanned in my life. I am milk bottle white. I don't tan. I just go red. I'm like a lobster in the sun. And it was always seen as odd for me not to wear fake tan, but I've never liked fake tan. I just don't like the feel of it on me or the look of it. But it's seen as sort of the more tanned you are in the West, the more beautiful you are. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it's a beauty standard, especially in the UK. Whereas in the East, I know that there are products that are literally designed to whiten your skin by bleaching your skin, which is so incredibly sad that people can't be proud of what they have and that the beauty industry plays on these insecurities in such a sense that they make women doubt their own appearance and their own beauty to the extent that they feel that they need to do this in order to be attractive, in order to find somebody. And I guess that's part of why I really love this show is that it doesn't just delve into the difficulties of being a woman in this time period, but the issues transcend into modern time. It deals with beauty standards, it deals with the lack of power that women have, the lack of education, being trafficked for sex, women having no other option but to sell themselves for money, that women are finding any way that they can to establish their own independence and authority. And of course, in this day and age, we do have more rights than women back in the medieval ages had, but we still are fighting to end child marriage and sex trafficking and making sure that women are not the victims of assault or abuse, that women are taken seriously and not victim blamed. We're also having to deal with the issues of the increase in incel culture and the rise of misogyny. And it's just amazing to see a show that is still so relevant, even whilst detailing what it was like for women back then, and then being able to see that connection with them and how that still pertains to today. And I know people are like, oh, you're politicizing. Everything is political. Let's be real. Nothing you watch and consume media wise is apolitical. Everything has politics in it because it's influenced by the author and their political views. You can't remove politics from media, just like you can't remove politics from books unless you're reading The Hungry Hungry Caterpillar. But even then, The Hungry Hungry Caterpillar could be an allegory for capitalism. You could argue that politics need to be removed from media, but it's never going to happen because as human beings, we are inherently political. Everything we do is political. Everything we believe in is political to an extent. So, I think it's one of the arguments that always really irks me is when I see people going like, I'm so sick of politics in gaming or anime or media. Just say that you lack media literacy and that's fine and we'll move on because it's not being shoved down your throat. It's just always been there because media and literature and games are designed to hold up a mirror to society. They are designed to provoke your thought process, to think deeper about the world around you, and to connect emotionally with what they're showing you and the issues that are important to the author and the writers. You might not like the politics in the show, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong for it to be promoted. It doesn't mean that it's not okay for them to express their politics, you know? You don't have to agree with it. You might not like it, but to argue that everything should be apolitical is just an incredibly redundant argument because it would be boring. Every show would be boring. Do you get what I mean? And it always makes me laugh because it's always the people that enjoy games like Bioshock or Halo or watch Star Wars and are big fans of it and they argue for like politics not being in media. And I'm like, did you even pay attention to the game you were playing, to the show you were watching? Because there are politics galore in Bioshock, and I could write a whole video essay on the politics of Bioshock because I absolutely adore that game series. It's been a long time since I've played it. I'm gonna have to replay it at some point. It's been like 5, 6 years since I've played the games. I try to have a play every year, but time has creeped up on me. Either way, my rant is over. It just annoys me. Politics are important. It's important that we discuss them. And it's also important that the media we consume also reflects politics because it makes us think and grow and become more intelligent people by actually listening to what the show is saying and dissecting it, whether you agree or disagree. If you disagree, it still provokes your thought process. You're still engaging with it in the ways that you disagree with it. It's still making you grow as a person. And if you agree with it, it sometimes makes you think a bit more critically about how you engage with the world, especially in relation to the politics that it's showing. And if you're on the fence, it can also change your perspective. It could make you shift one way or the other. It doesn't mean that it's influencing you, it doesn't mean that it's pushing an agenda. It just means it's holding a mirror up to you as a person and going, this is what's important to me as the author and as the writer. And whether you agree or not, I'm going to talk about what I feel is important. And it's your job to essentially think about it, think critically about it, and understand what we're saying to make us think deeper about the people we connect with and the world around us, and to maybe be the change in the world that we want to see. Everything is political. Everything is political. Even Pokemon. Just read some of the backstories in the Pokedex and you will start to see politics creep in, especially in relation to global warming and extinction. But without further ado, we're going to get into episode 10. You see what I mean? I love this show. It makes me think very critically. Why are you on the wall? Oh, maybe he's trying to figure out what's going on.
園遊会でリーシュ様に毒を持った犯人だったって。お使いするアードーヒを持ってのことだったのかな。
アードーヒって祝妃の？
うん。四夫人から外されて若い貴族を腰入れさせるって噂だったし。
Oh!
東宮時代の帝との間にできた男児を一人亡くしている。子を多くなすための高級という制度上仕方ないが、リファ様もこのまま子を宿さなければ同じようになるのだろうか。
It's just so disgraceful
いつまでも寵愛を受けられるとは断言でき
that women are only seen as a reproductive element.
高級の花は実を結ばねば意味がない。
The pressure you must feel, especially if you have issues carrying the baby, or if the baby dies. I mean, infant death rates were exceptionally high during this time.
今日は随分気合が入ってますね。
当然よ。上級妃、特妃のリージュ様がいらっしゃるんだから。
Oh, okay.
まさに高級の縮図がそこに広がっている。
It's their display of wealth, isn't it? Like, look how much I
あり
have.
がとうございます。
She's
いわ
so
ゆる
cute.
腹の探り合い。同性であれば身構えてしまうのが女という生き物なのだろうか。
I think it's this environment in
和やかな会話の
general.
中で情報を引き出す玉葉様は穏や
Gossip
かそうに見えてやはり気
has
先
a
だ。
high
得た情
price.
報は実家に送っているらしい。交易の中継地点らしく、人や時勢の流れをつかむことが重要なんだろう。
No, you can trade gossip for advantages in this society. So, of course, you're going to be wary of women because women are the primary traders of gossip and conversation.
甘いものは嫌いじゃないかしら。甘いものは好きです。よかった。
She's so
こういう
young.
のはどうかなと思って。柑橘の皮を蜂蜜で煮たものなの。体が温まるわよ。
Oh, that sounds really good.
お口に合うといいけど。
Oh, does she not like honey or?
また好き嫌い。
Ah, stop.
食べられないなんて。
You're disgracing her in front of another concubine. Your mistress should come first and foremost.
玉葉様。
あらら、アイラ、ごめんなさい。もう少し漬け込んだ方がいいみたい。
I love that she's trying to protect her.
残念ながら、いじめは
Why
間
do
違
they
いではな
want
かったらし
to
い。
bully her? She's so sweet.
玉葉妃とリーシュ妃の茶会はどうだった？
急にリーシュ様を呼んでお茶会なんて変だと思ったら、楽しく過ごされていましたよ。
Oh
話は
god.
終わってないんだが。
話していただけませんか？
Get off me.
下女は本当に自殺したと思うか？
She was murdered
それを決めるのは私ではありません。
一階の下女が特妃であるリーシュ妃の皿に毒を盛る理由。
because she was asked to by someone in a position of authority.
では明日からザクロ宮に手伝いに行ってもらえないか？
Oh?
もらえないかと質問されたところ
I
で選
love
択肢は
that
ないと
he
いう。
encourages her curiosity.
御意。
He likes her using her intuition.
玉葉妃の翡翠宮は家庭的で、リファ妃の水晶宮は高潔に洗練されていた。そして、アードー妃が住むザクロ宮は無駄がなく品があり、実用的だ。ジンシ様には何をしろとも言われていない。
Yeah, but he knows you're gonna find something
見
out.
ない顔だね。フォンミン、その娘たち
So
は
we're gonna learn more about
大掃除のお
Aldua.
手伝いに。
そう、よろしく頼むよ。
祝福
She's very
アードー妃
pretty. I love her
華やかさや傲慢
voice.
さはないが、中性的な凛々しさがあって美しい。こ
Like
れで
JINSHI
35ですか。
Like that kind of androgynous, delicate feature. Was that her on top of the wall then? At the beginning? I thought that was JINSHI. That was at the top of the wall.
憧れの眼差し。
Maybe it was her then.
誰かに似ているような。
JINSHI. She's very similar to
次女
him.
頭のフォンミン様。祝妃の次女頭ともなればいいところのお嬢様のはずだが、ずいぶん親しみやすい。
Mau Mau spotted the burns.
任せていいからね。
Or the bandage that's hiding the burns.
さすが上級妃一の古株。
My goodness.
これで終わり
So
か。
many books.
すごい、もうこんなに。しかも丁寧で助かるわ。応接室の方も手伝ってもらえる？
はい。人当たりが良くて他人をよく見て褒める。次女頭として人を扱う術を心がけ
Probably
ているよ
how
う
she
だ。
coerced the servant as well into poisoning the soup. Manipulative emotionally. But Jinshi knew that Mao Mao would spot something that would ignite her curiosity.
ジンシ様には何をしろとも言われていない。だが、
He didn't tell you not to do anything.
フォンミン様はその筆頭だ。適齢期はとうに過ぎているが、嫁いでいれば良妻にもなっただろう。
But she
結婚
clearly
しようとは
loves
思わなかった。
Aldua
それと
fiercely.
もアードー妃に生涯尽くすことを選んだのか。忠誠心の強さは毒殺を行う理由にもつながる。
But it can't be the
新
only
たな妃が
motive.
腰入れしようという今、上級妃の立場が最も危ういのはアー
Because
ド
she's
妃
the oldest.
だ。だが、先に他の席が空けば、リーシュ様のもとへは通っていない。
Oh, so he
14歳
doesn't
の
visit
年齢を
her.
考えれば望ましいことだが、妃としての役割を果たしていないとも言える。
I said this
リーシュ様を狙うのはおかしな話ではない。
because it would keep Aldua safe and secure. Because then they could take Lishi's place and then perform the role that Lishi's not performing. She's not actually performing the duties associated with being a concubine, which is having babies for the emperor. And Aldua's lost her son and hasn't had any more children. So it's a question of whether she can actually have more. But maybe the emperor keeps her around because he actually has affection for her. But still, her position would be threatened if he was looking to replace.
スパイの真似事などできるわけない。というか、最近態度が軽くないか？
もし特別な方法で外部と連絡を取れるとすれば、
Also, it was just confirmed that the emperor doesn't visit Lishi, so he doesn't touch her, which is good to know.
左の手首に包帯が
Which is confirmed what Jinshi already knows.
の木管は袖口が焦げた女物の衣に包まれていたそうで、
Jinshi already knows this.
正直あの穏やかな次女頭が何かをやっているようには見えなかったが、
I
そんな
mean,
ものは主観に過ぎ
can't judge a book by its cover. Even the sweetest faces can be the most deceptive.
これ見よがしに蜂蜜を食べておいて、この程度は調べていただろうに。
He did.
いい子にはご褒美をあげないとね。
遠慮します。
遠慮することはない。
Oh, Jinshi.
結構です。他の方に差し上げてください。こいつ顔がいいから何をしても許されると思っている。そういえばそういう変態だったな。
He's such a devil.
後で下剤持ってやる。
甘いものは嫌いな
I
の。
hear you. I can't do anything.
だが食べられるんだろう。
Jinshi, please.
話が通じない。ウエラ型でなければ股間を蹴って、いや、ないものは蹴っても仕方ない。命令と割り切るか。尊厳のため逃げ出すか。
Escape. Don't do it.
甘いものは嫌いじゃないかしら。お口に合うといいけど。
蜂蜜？
フォンミン様のご実家が養蜂場をなさっているの。
薬よ。
うちの次女に何をしているの？
玉葉妃、これは
誰の許可を得てこんなことを？
Ryokyu is furious.
シャオモ、ついいたずらが過ぎただけなので、ジンシ様を許してくださいませんか。
では次はガオシュン様が眠れば問題ないかと。
眠る。
Jinshi's a little shit, though. He made her so uncomfortable. He's a little shit. He loves to taunt her.
ジンシ様はいないの？
はい、突然申し訳ありません。
Oh, she wanted Jinshi.
翡
She
翠
has a
宮の次女が
crush.
何の用かしら？なんで
蜂蜜はお嫌いですか？
わかるの？
顔に出ていますから。昔蜂蜜でお腹を壊
She's
したこと
so
が
sweet.
食中毒になって
Honestly, I
受け
don't
付けなくなる
understand
こと
how
は
anyone
珍
can
しくあり
bully
ません。
her. She's just so
それ
cute.
は違うわ。覚えていないの。赤子の頃のことだから。一時は命も危うかったと聞いたわ。以来、乳母たちにも食べるなと言われていて。
あなた失礼じゃなくてリーシュ様にズケズケと。
Oh, so now you chime in.
お茶会でかばいもしなかった次女が
I was
よく言
gonna
う。
say,
その目。
特妃であるリーシュ様に対して無礼ですわ。
don't listen to
で
them.
す。
They're
こ
not
うして
doing their
外部の
job.
ものを悪役に仕立て、自分たちだけが味方と思い込ませるのか。
And then make fun of her behind her back.
孤立した妃は次女たちに頼らざるを得ない。いじめられていることにすら気づかず。悪循環だ。
Really is, especially because she's so young. She doesn't understand.
言いたいことがあれば、ジンシ様に直接どうぞ。
Hey!
様に直
Yeah, go and speak to
これくらいの嫌がらせ
Jinshi.
は許されるだろ。何を理由にこの次女たちが変態宦官に近づくか楽しみだ。
The pervert eunuch.
ザクロ級の次女頭フォンミン様と面識はありますか？
Oh, she looks terrified. She's not going to be as sweet as everyone thinks she is. She's going to have this dark side to her.
賢い娘だ。弱い17とは思えない。
Oh, she's
知識の深さ
only
と冷静さ。
17.
理性
She's
的に
very
物事を
smart for her
考え
age.
処理する能力。
You
一部変わった
honestly
ところ
would
は
think
ある
she's
が
older.
目を見張るものがある。
She's not peculiar.
4年前、今の帝がまだ東宮だった頃、アードー人の間に男児を一人設けている。生まれた時期は先帝と皇太后の子、すなわち元帝の弟君と同じ時期。東宮時代の子はその一人だけ。妃もアードー妃だけだった。今の帝とアードー妃は父兄弟とあるので、アードー妃に愛着があるのはわかるが。
When the current emperor was still a prince, he had a son with Aldua, right? He was born around the same time as the emperor's younger brother. Okay, so the emperor had a younger brother, but also had a son with Aldua, and Aldua was his only concubine at the time. Current emperor and concubine Aldua are foster siblings. Or were they foster siblings in terms of that Aldua was raised in the palace alongside the emperor when he was a prince, and that's how they met? Because royal families would often foster children from noble families and raise them alongside their children to foster strong connections between the noble families and their families, and it would also ensure their loyalty because they're not going to turn against a monarch if their child is in their hands, which is why often royal families would foster the heir to noble titles, because it would keep families in check because they don't want to lose their heir, especially if it's their only heir. So maybe what they mean is that Alduro was fostered by the old emperor and raised alongside the current emperor before he was emperor. And that's how they met one another and how she became his concubine. Because other than that, it doesn't really make sense how they're foster siblings. But okay, so that's interesting. So she had a son at the same time as the emperor having a little brother. I was going to say something really out of pocket, but it wouldn't really make sense.
16年前、乳幼児死亡、取り上げたの。なんとなく、そんな気がしていた。高級に数多く生えている薬草は、私が昔からよく使っていたものばかりだ。誰かが移植したものだろう。花町のクス氏にしておくにはもったいないほどの医術を持つ。
Her dad!
片足の膝の骨を抜かれた。
Wait, her dad's a eunuch?
何やってんだよ。
And he was expelled. But then if he's a eunuch, he's not her dad. So who is her dad? Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, so again, prestigious, but he can't be her dad if he's a eunuch. So he's not Mao Mao's dad. So how did Mao Mao come to be raised by him? And why was he expelled? He delivered Aldua's baby. Something is plaguing my mind, and again, it may be really wildly out of pocket. There has been some really strong hints here that Jinshi could actually be Aldua's son, primarily because the baby died. Aldua's never had another child. Jinshi has the same appearance as Aldua, very androgynous in terms of appearance, and Mao Mao's dad was expelled shortly after. Why was he expelled if not to conceal something? So if there was a baby born at the same time, right? Who's to say that the babies weren't switched? Because that's not uncommon, babies being switched. I don't know, it's just, it's very odd that Mao Mao's dad delivered the baby for Aldua and then was expelled as if he knew something that could be so detrimental to the way that the royal family operates that he couldn't be allowed to stay in case he ever revealed it. much in the same way that that servant was murdered after poisoning Lishi because she knew too much. She knew something she shouldn't have known. And that was the only way to silence her because she couldn't just be expelled. She had to be removed entirely. But also, it's the fact that Mama's like, who does she remind me of? And they're fawning over Aldua the same way they fawn over Jinshi. They have a similar facial structure, similar coloring, similar demeanor in terms of how they carry themselves. Obviously, Jinshi's more childish. The fact that the Emperor had a baby brother who was born at the same time as Aldua's son, because who's to say that they didn't switch the babies because one of the babies died? Like, the prince died, and they thought, well, it's only the baby of a concubine, but it still has royal blood, so therefore we'll take Aldua's baby and raise it as the prince's baby brother. So if anything happens to the prince, then his little brother can take over. I don't know. It might be just a really wild out of pocket theory, but it's just how similar Jinshi and Aldua are that makes me kind of think that there's something there. And then also the fact that her dad delivered Aldua's baby and then shortly after was expelled. That means he knows something that he shouldn't know. And obviously, changing babies would be a very big secret that you wouldn't want to come out. Because if Jinshi is Aldua and the current emperor's son, and he was then switched and took the place of the current emperor's baby brother who died, then Jinshi is actually the heir because he would be the current emperor's eldest son. Meaning, again, he can't be a eunuch if that is the case, but he would be the heir. He's still the heir as the younger brother because the emperor doesn't have any children. But if he is the current emperor's son with Aldua that's been switched, then he is the heir regardless because he is the oldest boy and the only surviving boy. But it's just the similarities to Aldua that's making me think that perhaps he is Aldua's son and that Aldua's son didn't die. Because it's just a coincidence, very weirdly, that two babies were born at the same time, both male, and then the one that delivers Aldua's son is also the one that's expelled. Why was he expelled? What was so important that they had to conceal it by expelling him and banning him from the palace? They can't kill him because he's of use, he's valuable, but he knows something and would have been a threat to the dynamic, which is why they had to expel him. And then it would also make sense as to why Jinshi resembles Aldua so much in terms of appearance, in terms of the way the servants react to them both with the same sort of love-struck face. At the beginning of the episode, I think it was Aldua that was sat on the wall, but I actually thought it was Jinshi at first because they look so alike. They're so similar. And Mao Mao's like, who does she remind me of? She reminds me of someone. Jinshi. So Jinshi has to be Aldua's son. But then the question is, what happened to the prince? Why did the prince die? And then also thinking back to the tea party, when they're telling Mao Mao about the Empress Dowager, who had the current emperor at a very young age, it didn't mention what age she was when she had the prince. She obviously had another baby because the current emperor did have a baby brother, but it's not really focused on as much. I think Jinshi is Aldua's. I don't think Aldua's son died. I think for some reason the babies were switched. Mao Mao's dad knows that they were switched, maybe participated in helping the babies be switched, and agreed to be expelled, maybe accepted it because it meant keeping his life. And that's why he's no longer there. And also why he said it was weird that of all the places that Mao Mao could return to, it would be there because he used to work there. He served there. He was a doctor. I think he delivered Aldua's baby. I think he was involved in switching the babies. And he was expelled to keep that a secret. But then the question comes down to is, if that is the case, how did the prince die? And how were the babies switched? Did the Empress Dowager know that the babies were switched? Had she raised Jinshi thinking that he's her baby all along? Or was she involved in it? Did she switch the babies because her baby died and she demanded that Aldua's baby be given to her so that she could raise them? Or did she do it to protect the baby because she knew that any heir to the soon to be emperor would be at risk of being harmed because it's his legitimate child? It's his child that could then end up inheriting. Was it maybe a protective act? Was it maybe that they thought, if we pretend that the baby is the brother rather than the son to the current emperor, we can keep him safe from any that mean to do him harm until he's of an age old enough to inherit the throne? Jinshi wouldn't be aware of this. He obviously would be raised as the emperor's brother, which would be a fucking mind fuck for you if you found out that you were actually his son all along, because he would have been raised thinking that's my brother. But it could either be that the Empress Dowager lost her son and wanted Aldua's son as a replacement, and Aldua didn't have a say because she is still a consort, and she wouldn't have been the Empress Dowager at the time. She would have been the Empress, so she would have exerted considerable power and authority. She would have had no say if the Empress at the time wanted her son to replace the one that she's lost, and then they kept it hush hush by basically saying Aldua's baby died. But it wasn't Aldua's baby, it was actually the Empress's baby that had died. Or it was done to protect Aldua's baby because Aldua's baby would be seen as a legitimate target to undermine the crown. So maybe it's a conspiracy between Aldua and the Empress, or it could be that Aldua switched the babies without the Empress knowing to protect her son because she felt that he would be at risk of being targeted and killed because of him being the heir to the soon to be emperor. But I think Jinshi has to be Aldua's. The more I think about it and the more little threads this episode's been dropping, it seems like Jinshi is Aldua's and the current emperor's son, who was switched and has been raised as the emperor's brother but isn't actually the emperor's little brother. But then it comes down to why. What a fucking twist, if that's the case. That is complicated. What a twist, though. Lehawa and Gyokyu are the safest. Lishi and Aldua are the ones most at risk because Lishi is too young and Aldua is considered too old or getting too old and hasn't had any more children since the son she had that is dead. So I think the head lady in waiting, who was present at the birth of Aldua's son, she's aware that Aldua's position is at risk, that people might plot to have her replaced because they think she's too old and that the emperor needs someone more young and ripe, and that the emperor might concede to the pressure even if he does have great affection for Aldua and obviously love for her if he's kept her around for so many years. And he was present at the birth of the baby as well. And he wasn't present at the birth of Lehawa's baby. We actually never saw him see Lehawa's baby, but he did see Aldua's son, which was his son. So obviously he has a lot of love and affection for her in a way that he doesn't necessarily have for the others. I know Gyokyu is seen as his favorite, but for him to have kept Aldua around for so long is a sign of respect and admiration and loyalty. Perhaps people are trying to influence Aldua to be replaced because of her age, and he's trying to fight against it, but he also knows that he can't really fight against it because, again, everything here is tied to reproduction. When women are no longer able to bear children, they are discarded. They are only as valuable as their reproductive organs are, which is, again, a very dehumanizing aspect and is another critique on how women are viewed and valued. And a lot of my research has been into gender stereotypes and gender socialization in both femininity and masculinity. So this show really tickles like my PhD interest. So, yeah, if I rant and ramble a lot about social political issues and how the show touches upon them, that's why. But yes, the two at risk are Aldua and Lishi. So it could be that the head servant for Aldua wants to ensure Aldua stays where she is by getting Lishi taken out of the picture, whether that's through dying or from the court being seen as too dangerous that they let her go and replace her with someone that can perform the reproductive necessity that the emperor is looking for, but keeps Aldua safe because her position doesn't need to be replaced anymore because there is now a third concubine that can give birth alongside Gyokyu and Lee Hauer. But what a phenomenal episode. My mind is in a tizzy though, because I genuinely am now like, I think Jinshi is Aldua's son, which is crazy. But the more I think about it and the more I've talked about it, the more I've like convinced myself. And maybe it's gaslighting, maybe it's delusion, but like I'm fully sort of on that mindset now that Jinshi is Aldua and the current Emperor's son, and the babies will switch. At first, I was like, that feels really out of pocket. And I'd said before the episode ended, I was about to say something that I felt was really out of pocket. And that was the out of pocket theory. But just the more little threads this episode dropped, the more I'm like, something's not sitting right with me here. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment below to help boost this video into the algorithm. And until next episode, bye!